What is up, guys? Welcome to the channel. I want to remind everyone to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But I want to just jump right in. The MVP of the NBA has a big issue. That's probably what the title is going to be, something like that. But just looking at the current standings, today, March 16th, the leaderboard is, of course, Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis, with Jokic having 58% probability of winning it. And I think his past two MVPs and maybe his third one shows everything that I have a problem with the NBA, which is in terms of the MVP, which is inconsistency. The MVP award, going back all the way to the 70s, it's just been inconsistent from year to year, where we don't know is it going to be a year where they choose narrative and they give it to a player like Russell Westbrook just because he had insane stats, or last year where Jokic had amazing advanced numbers, which different topic. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but it just doesn't make too much sense to why they're not consistent. Right? Are they giving it to the best player on the best team? Are they giving it to the best player in the league? Are they giving it to whoever has the best narrative? What's going on? No one really know. I don't even know if they themselves know what type of criteria they use to decide, hey, this player should be the MVP of the league. Because the MVP is a very coveted award, right? Not that many players win an MVP in their whole career. Most Hall of Famers don't win an MVP because you can only win one every year. And a lot of people who, they're top three in the MVP for 2-3 years and they never end up winning it, like Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard was a top 3 MVP candidate for a few years, but he never ended up winning it because he had to compete with LeBron James. So it's just, we don't understand why it is that they don't have any consistency. Going back all the way to, let me see what year it was. 1978, where Bill Walton wins it, even though he played 58 games. He missed a lot of games, right? His stats weren't even that amazing compared to Kareem at that age and that time, where Kareem was putting up, insane numbers as he did his whole career. But Bill Walton wanted over him because his value to the team was very apparent, right? They win the championship the year prior. He goes out halfway through the season. They start losing. They don't win in the playoffs ever again, right? At least not a finals. So it shows, hey, he is the most valuable player in the league, right? A little bit of narrative, but mostly showing that, the winning percentage is the reason that he won MVP. Same goes for Steve Nash, where he goes from the Phoenix Suns the year prior, the year before he joined, they were a lottery team. And then since he joined, they're like a 55-plus win team for the, 6 years that he was there, however long he was there for. Right? They're a good team as soon as he got there. Even though his numbers were not the best, he averaged 15 and 11 or something like that, right? Nothing crazy. But he was the floor general. He was the reason that they ended up winning so many games, even when his best players were out. Marius Stoudemire missed a lot of the time when Steve Nash won the MVP. That they gave it to Steve Nash instead. Most people say Kobe. I don't think that was right, because Kobe, if I'm not mistaken, was the 8th seed that season. If anything, it should have gone to LeBron, whose team won 50 games and he was putting up insane numbers, 31, 7, and 7. That's the first year where I think LeBron really took over the league. But if anything, LeBron should have won it because he was also just as valuable to his team. He put up insane numbers. But Steve Nash got it because it showed that, hey, last season where Steve Nash wasn't there, they win 20-something, 30-something games, and then he comes in and they win 50-plus, right? It's just the amount of games that they win just because they got this one player. And I think this is, I don't know if this is my favorite way of picking the MVP, but I think it makes sense to why they give this type of MVP, right? Like Dirk's MVP year, I'm sure, I don't have the stats open in front of me, but I'm sure players had better stats than him. Dirk was not someone who was putting up, insane numbers, but he was an impactful player. He was efficient and he was a good scorer, right? But that season, I think they won 68 games, right? But they ended up getting bounced in the first round, which is why no one ever talks about that team. But you can see, hey, this player is the most valuable on his team. He got them the most wins for a reason. But then this becomes the second argument where, okay, do you just give it to the best player on the best team, right? Where a lot of people argue with D Rose year is, hey, this player, he got it just because LeBron went to Miami and they didn't want to give it to him again, and narrative based. Where in fact, if you really look at it, the Bulls were the number one seed in the whole NBA, right? They had the most wins, and it was because of Derrick Rose, right? His second, third best players were constantly in and out of the lineup, right? His whole team was injury riddled, but I think they still won 60 games that season. Or I'm not exactly sure if it was 60, but I know they were the number one seed in the NBA. So even that one, like, you can say, hey, he's a top player in the league, right? Top 5, undisputed top 5 player in the league, best record in the league, and he legitimately did not have much help around him, right? And he got them to the first seed. Okay, so that's where I think the difference comes in, for me at least, with Nikola Jokic, right? If you listen to the podcast, you know I think he's pretty overrated in my opinion, right? The stats, the advanced, every person that talks about him, that loves him, is always the advanced statistics, that he's so efficient, this, that. At the end of the day, when I watch basketball, right, of course I look into the stats too. Nikola Jokic per 75 numbers are like 24 points per game with like plus 12 efficiency. Like, he's still an amazing player, top 10 player in the league, undisputedly top 10, right? Maybe even higher. But he's not the best or the second best or the third best player in the league, in my opinion. And they just constantly keep giving him the MVP. He's, at this point, you can see, hey, he's like a media darling, which for good reason. He's a very good player, right? And he makes insane highlight passes, right? Some stuff that we've never seen from a center before. You know, arguably, if not already, the best passing big man of all time, right? But to say that he's the best offensive big man of all time, you look at his scoring, right? 24 points per game per 75. It's not like it's crazy, right? It's still good. Plus 12 efficiency is amazing too, right? But you could say the same thing about like a player like Steve Nash, right? Which is why they hated it. The difference because he wasn't as scoring as much as other players, even if he was efficient. But the difference between Steve Nash and Jokic is that even though they had comparable level of help, Jokic ended up with the 6th seed last year, and Steve Nash was like the 1st or 2nd seed. That's the difference. Right? Even though you can say, yes, he should have a case, you know, maybe he wins one, right? His first MVP season, I don't know if this is a general consensus or not, but in my opinion, you know, if Embiid didn't miss a bunch of time, I think that's Embiid's awards because they were the 1st seed in the East that season. Yeah, with 49 wins, right? The Nuggets were the 3rd seed with 47, so only 2 games behind, right? This is when the West was, you know, a lot more tough than the East, where, you know, now it's a lot more parity in the league, but that's besides the point. So you can see, okay, even though it's a 3rd seed, right? No one won MVP as a 3rd seed since like Larry Bird until Russell Westbrook did it, and then now Denver Nuggets. Okay, like I understand that, right? They're giving flexibility to players, right? It's not just about team wins, right? A player's value does not equate to wins. Basketball is a team sport. Okay, so that makes sense. You know, you give it to the 3rd seed, that's fine. He did put up good numbers. This was kind of his ascension into like being a top 10 player, right? And the next, like the runner-up who could have won it, missed a bunch of time. Fair, right? I think that's understandable. But last season, where they're the 6th seed in the West, right? He puts up like crazy advanced numbers. You're not even being consistent from back-to-back years. And then now what they're doing is number 1 seed, best player, best team, right? Even though his numbers, of course, they're still as good as they were last year, right? But it just doesn't make sense to why does he get the MVP again when you're going from 1 year, you know, it's narrative based, and then 1 year you're going stats, 1 year you're going this, 1 year you're going that. It doesn't make any sense, especially when this is a player who, again, has not done anything in the playoffs. He made it to 1 conference finals, and that's it. Sure, his teams have been injured, but even that conference finals run, if Jamal Murray doesn't decide to go crazy in the bubble, do they make that conference run? And when they did make it to the Western Conference, they pretty easily got handed they pretty easily got beaten. It wasn't like it was a close 7-game series. I think they got out of there in like 5 or 6 games. And some of those games were close, but I don't think anyone believed that the Nuggets were going to win that series. And I don't understand why they keep doing this, right? And especially with a player like Nikola Jokic, where the whole reason I'm bringing up the point was he hasn't really done anything in the playoffs, and you're kind of changing the narrative over and over again just so you can win MVP, is look at Russell Westbrook in 2016, right? Very narrative-based, very stats-based, right? Same thing with kind of Jokic last year, where his narrative was, oh, his whole team is out. He's putting these insane all-time advanced numbers, not even normal numbers, advanced numbers. But he's doing it on a team where his team is not that good because his second best player is injured. Understandable. Okay. But you give it to the 6th seed, right? Okay, you did it a few years ago for Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook turned around and averaged a triple-double for 2 more seasons after that. And no one cared. Right? At that point, and then it was 2017 where it was a Harden year, right? Okay, you can say Harden deserved it. He put insane numbers, and they were the best team, and the best team and the best record in the league. But again, you're not being consistent with your own decision on the criteria for the MVP. What is the criteria, right? If you're stripping it down, if you're putting, going to basics, MVP means the most valuable player, right? Are these players really the most valuable? Where I keep using the Nuggets as an example, right? But I'll go back to the Steve Nash example, right? If you remove Steve Nash and you put almost any other player besides maybe Jason Kidd, right? Who's a little bit, I think Steve Nash has played a little bit more up-tempo with that style. I don't think Jason Kidd would have worked in that system either, right? Maybe LeBron, but his passing wasn't as refined as it did get a little bit when he got a little bit older, right? So Steve Nash was undoubtedly the most valuable player. You look at this Nuggets team, and sure, they don't have a second star when Jamal Murray was out, right? Even Jamal Murray is not, he's not an all-star. He's just a very good role player, all-star minus. But to say that he should win the MVP and his team, and putting the narrative around him that the team is not, it's not even like all that. But if you replaced him with a different player, I think they win the same amount of games. They're in the same position that they are now. So I think it just, right? I mean, all of this is subjective. There's no way to really prove this, right? But I think narrative-based, and then having this many like separate ideas of what the MVP should be is where I think for me the issue comes into play, right? Because I think Giannis is, for example, for this year specifically, where the race is so tight, where the top 3. I mean, if this was a normal year with the numbers Luka, Tatum, Donovan Mitchell are putting up, like this is a year that one of them could have won it, right? Just because they're putting crazy numbers and they're winning a lot of games. Luka, I mean, for the Mavs, I guess it doesn't apply at this moment. They've had an up and down season, but Jason Tatum, I think, would have an amazing case, right? If it wasn't for these top 3 players taking over the MVP completely for like 3 years now. And I think it does matter that the best player should win it when he's in this position, right? This is a problem I had with Michael Jordan missing a bunch of MVPs. Hakeem lost the MVP to David Robinson, right? And then you see him in the playoffs where he goes off against him because he's like, that should have been my MVP. I was a better player, right? So your criteria your own criteria isn't aligning from year to year. And I keep saying this over and over again because I really don't see a way that, a way that they could fix this, where they could be like, hey, this is our set of criteria, right? I think they just did announce a minimum number of games you have to play to win awards, which I think is a really good thing. I think that's, I think it was already an unwritten rule. Everyone knows this. This was an unwritten rule, but just putting it into writing, I think it does help. And I mean, you have to what would you put for the MVP, right? What if there is a season like last year? Like last year, where, the narrative was insanely high for Nikola Jokic. He put up amazing numbers. His team was injured, put him on their back, and, made it to the playoffs. Or for Russell Westbrook in 2017, where same thing, Kevin Durant leaves, he has the insane narrative, he puts up a triple-double for the average of the season, and he wins the MVP, right? So just contextualizing the MVP award I think it's a little bit important, because you really have to dig deep and be like, okay, this is the reason why this player won MVP and this player didn't, right? Just because you win MVP does not mean you're the best player. I think that's something that a lot of, especially casual fans, I'm not saying that, there aren't people who don't realize this already, but especially when I was a casual fan, right? When I was younger, when I didn't really watch basketball as much, to me it was like, oh, this player won the MVP, he must be either the first, second, or third best player in the league, right? Which it's not the case. And there just needs to be some criteria, some way that they could fix this. Is there any way? I don't think there is. I feel like this is just a video of me getting on here and rambling for a bit. But this has just been my opinion for a while, right? Since I think since 2017, where I said Russell Westbrook should win it, but at the end of the season, I said I don't think he should because he's a 6th seed. But they gave it to him anyways because narrative and stats, right? Which I didn't agree with at the time. That was like the first, that was like the second, that was one of the first few seasons where I really started watching the NBA. But I think this is where I'm going to wrap it up. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of content, like, comment, subscribe. If you guys have any ideas for, what we could do to fix the MVP, or if you think it's good and I'm just, talking for no reason, just comment down below. Give me your thoughts.